This decade has been one hell of a decade. For me, at least. I know other people have their own stories about how the decade was big for them, but me personally, it was probably the biggest. Not just because it's really the only decade that I'm probably going to remember fully, seeing as I was 10 at the start of the decade and I'm now 19. But I feel like I've changed quite a bit, as as one normally should do, I guess. But some change is good, and some of the change is not so good. So where do I start with this? Probably at the beginning. Get it? Your jokes and that. By the way, this entire recording isn't going to be, depressing. A lot of it is actually quite good. This decade hasn't just been terrible. It's just been crazy. That's all I can really say for the tone I give this. It's not been perfect. It's not been terrible. It's just been crazy. So, thinking back to 2010, I was in year 5 of primary school, and I had absolutely no idea where my future was heading. It wasn't a good time for me, primary school. Primary school was not a memory I cherish, being honest. But I think year 5 and then leading into year 6 was a particularly tricky time for me because it was nearing the end of my time at primary school and moving into high school. High school plays a major factor into the decade, by the way, as it took up a majority of the decade. Well, a large majority of it is. High school was the biggest time, but although I'm starting over myself, we'll get to high school later. But my last 2 years of primary school, what can I say about it? Um, Definitely what I remember most about my time at primary school. Maybe I've just blanked out the rest of the other bad stuff, or as much bad stuff as I could. But I do remember a lot from, year 5 and year 6. I think it was when I was first getting into Pokemon, actually. Yeah, I was introduced to Pokemon in year 5, and I've been a fan of the series ever since. I know, crazy, right? And I think it was around that time because 2010 leading into around 2011 or 12 was around about the time that Pokemon White and Pokemon Black and White came out. So I was introduced to a whole new generation of Pokemon when I'd only just been introduced to the series itself, which had been going on unaware to me ever since the 90s. Crazy. Did I feel sad or happy leaving primary school? I'm going to say both. Sad because, you're leaving something behind that you have become accustomed to for about 6 years. 7 if you include reception, and maybe 8 if you include nursery. I don't think that counts. We'll just say 7 reception, and then year 1 to 6. We'll say that counts as primary school. But it was sad to let it go, but I was also happy that I wouldn't have to deal with a lot of bullshit from there. A lot of the bullshit was gone when I left in 2000 and it was it 2000 and wait, hold on a minute. I've got my years mixed up. Hold on. It was 2012 when I left. Oh right, so I wasn't even in year 5 when I was in when I was in 2010. I was in year 4. Wow. I don't really remember much about year 4. Like I said, I don't really remember. I don't really remember year 5 or year or is that. I remember year 5 and year 6 the most. I don't really remember a lot of what came before that, other than a few specific memories, which I could go on forever if I talked about here. But to cut it short, I was happy and sad to leave primary school, as I mentioned before. I probably should have written down a script for this, but I wanted to go solo about it, seeing if I can do this naturally. Then came high school. One of the scariest points of my life was joining high school, because I'd be joining a class full of a shitload of other people, students, who I didn't even know. Some of them I knew. Some of them I knew from primary school, but I didn't really speak with a whole lot. But when I got to high school, I guess that often happens. When you get there, you sort of drift apart. But high school was particularly terrifying for me to go to, because it would be one of the first steps that I would be taking to not necessarily doing things on my own, but sort of finding an identity for myself, which wouldn't really come into priority until I'd choose my options in year 9. But year 7 would be the sort of start with it, sort of give you the stabilizers at the back of your bike. Then once you get to year 9, it's like, okay, now we're gonna take these off. Now you gotta see what it is that you want to do with yourself. And to my surprise, I did pretty well in year 7 and onwards. It was the year where I started to sort of. It was the year that I started to progress, let's say. Because throughout primary school, I didn't really do that well. Some of it could be from the teachers not really understanding me and my autism. But a lot of my time in primary school, I was put in lower classes. Because I couldn't do that well. I couldn't concentrate that much, and I struggled to remember certain bits of information. But I remember the day where it kicked in, when I needed to. I remember the day where it kicked in my mind that I'd need to sort of, knuckle down and see if I can get a. I remember the day where it kicked in my mind that I needed to make an improvement on myself, which looked promising considering that I was going to get teacher support when I went to high school. But I remember the very day that it kicked in the back of my mind that I'd need to sort of make a progression. It was when I was on holiday in Spain with my sister, my mum, and my mum's friend. It was actually, I think it was the weekend before I joined high school. Or it was just a weekend before I joined high school. It was. I know it was during the summer holidays before I joined high school, and I was sat down at the table, and the conversation topic came up about me going to high school, and it was something that I hadn't really thought about over the time period of the summer holidays after year 6. I was more or less thinking, oh, thank God primary school's over. Now I can let that all go and sort of relax a bit. I don't need to be near that anymore. I don't need to be. Yeah, I could just sort of be away from it. But then when that conversation topic rose, that I'd be going to high school within a few days, that's when it hit me. I'd be going to an entirely new place. I'd be surrounded by almost entirely new people, and I knew that I'd need to make a change for people to not just be able to be around me, but also, actually like me for who I was. And I think I managed that pretty well because, to my surprise, I made a hell of a lot of friends in year seven. I managed to get on pretty well with them, and they managed to, get on pretty well with me. They got an understanding for me, and I was sort of taken aback by it. That there were a majority of people that were my age that could understand me and not necessarily like understand how my brain works, because I'm sure they would be like confused by some things that I'd say or do on some days. But but they were friendly to me. They were able to make me laugh, and I could talk to them if I was, feeling stressed out about something, or I could talk to them if they were feeling stressed out about something. I started to feel human, so to speak, which might sound a bit odd, but to me that isn't. It just isn't. It isn't. And as I said, with teacher support all throughout high school, I started to become sort of laid back when I went there. I'd wake up on mornings and I wouldn't think, oh great, I've got to go to this place again. I'd got to go, oh great, I'm going to go to this place today. This is going to be great. No, I realise I've just said like great 4 times in the last sentence, but you know me, never really plan ahead. And everything went okay. My grades started to climb as I was able to pay more well, not necessarily pay more attention, but I was able to concentrate more on my work, what I needed to do, and do correctly. And everything got on alright. Then came the day where I needed to pick my subjects. The chosen subjects that I'd be doing throughout year 10 and year 11 before, leaving high school. And at first, this is actually a funny story, this. At first I wanted to be a games designer. Because I'd become, I think by that point, by around year 9, which I think was 2015, 2015, I'd become I'd become a gamer. I'd become a huge fan of gaming itself, and I had a lot of favourite series of games. Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Mario. I'd recently gotten into Mega Man, and I was also still a pretty massive Pokemon fan. I still am today. And I thought, I like playing video games. I want to get into game design. I want to be able to make these kind of games. Maybe possibly maybe I could work for the people that make my favourite gaming series, and sort of see where I can go with it. Because I feel like I was starting to develop a creative mindset. I liked being creative. I could be in my own world, so to speak, when I was being creative. It's something I can still do when I'm writing stories or trying to draw something, or just sort of making YouTube videos. That was another thing that started. Hold on, let me check this up. On the 31st of March in 2015, I started this channel, and I got shit views. Which wasn't necessarily like my fault. There was only like so many videos that I could put up back then, and even then the videos that I put up were very shit quality. Back when I had no editing equipment, I had no practice recording myself in front of a camera. I had the shittiest built-in webcam known to mankind, the shittiest microphone known to mankind. Even when I tried buying an extension for it, it still didn't work out. And I got an average of about, I want to say, 20 subscribers in about 3 years. But it was something that I could escape to. It was something where I could talk about a game series that I enjoyed and share with other people, because it was around that time that I was getting into game reviews done by Some Call Me Johnny and The Completionist. I liked what they were doing. I liked the comedic. I liked the comedic skits, and I also liked how in depth they got into the games and describing what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. And I thought, I can do that. I reckon. I mean, God knows I've got to make the most of all the free time I've got. And it's because I enjoyed talking about games so much as well as playing them, I figured, why not look into game design? That'll be something interesting for my future. So, when it came to choosing my options, I picked computer science as one of my main chosen subjects. And within about, I want to say, a month into doing those subjects, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do computer science. There was just, maybe it was due to the fact that the lessons were so uninteresting, but I just couldn't find the soul for it. Trying to remember certain names for certain amounts of like data memory, as well as what makes this feature work with that feature. How does this work in a computer? Yeah, I understand there's things that you need to know about the computer, but how do I make this man jump over a pit to grab the sword? That's what I didn't learn. And because I didn't learn that from that, I sort of lost my interest in looking at game design for future, because I figured it's just going to be way too hard if it's just going to be all of this. And I thought to myself, alright, what can I do now? Let's look at my other subjects and see what I can work from this. How can I save myself? Product design. Didn't really fancy the idea of just looking at architecture and then just like and they're trying to build something. I could see the appeal for architecture, but trying to build something out of the back of my mind for, say, I don't know, The Apprentice, I don't think I'd be able to do that, particularly how when we were building something we were under like time pressures and there was only so many materials and so many amounts, and there was only so many materials and so little amount of time and so little equipment that we were able to use for that. So I thought I'd draw a line under that. I'd still continue to do the subjects that I've chosen and, you know, to try and progress in them a bit, but for my main subject that I'd be following after high school, I didn't choose, as I didn't decide to follow computer science or product design. Engineering I thought was okay, but I didn't really see myself as a sort of standard, you know, engine fixer. This is going to sound a little bit cruel, but I didn't really see a reason to try and remember like what makes this bit work in an engine when I could just take my car down to a mechanic, if I ever did get a car in my future. What was my other subject? So there was product design, there was computer science. What was my other one? I remember what the third one is, but I'm trying to remember what the fourth. There was product design, computer science, engineering. What was the other one? I know what the fourth one is, but I'm trying to think if there was anything before. If there was anything else. No, I guess not. The fourth subject that I had chosen to follow was media studies. I got the idea for choosing media studies because I had gotten into watching this show on Netflix. It's not necessarily a Netflix-made show, but it was a BBC programme called I'm Alan Partridge. It was how I was introduced to the character of I'm Alan Partridge. My mum introduced me to the series, and I'd often watch it after, you know, long days of school where I'd feel tired and I just felt like I needed a laugh, like, you know, sit down in front of the TV and have a laugh. And while watching it, not only did I find it funny to watch, but I was also intrigued into the idea of like working on a radio station, being a radio presenter like Alan Partridge. Obviously, better than Alan Partridge was ever being a radio presenter, but that idea intrigued me, and I thought, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look into media studies. So the media studies course I decided to put my most effort into. And that was the course that I think I found the most fun when I was in when I was in high school. It was by putting all of my effort into doing media studies that I started to find a little bit of an identity for myself, and I thought, okay, this is something that that I really enjoy doing. I'm going to continue doing. I'm going to continue doing this. And so then it came to the time of GCSEs. I put my most effort into my media exams, and I think I ended up with yeah, I passed it, smashed it. Obviously, didn't end up with the highest grade, but what can you do when you try your best, eh? Thinking back to when I was doing my GCSEs, while we're on that topic, man, I don't think I'd ever been more stressed and more depressed in my entire life during that time period. Taking my GCSEs, that was the entirety, well, not really the entirety, but a majority of 2017. 2016 was when I did mock exams, which they were stressful, but not really as stressful as the idea of doing GCSEs. But the GCSEs exams, man. I'd like to think that I did well when I did my GCSEs. I mean, obviously, I did well in media studies. That's how I ended up in college, as well as maths and English. I couldn't give a fuck about science either way. But 2017 for the GCSE side specifically was a particularly tricky time for me. A very tricky time for me, as I was not only faced with um, taking exams that would not necessarily define my future and where I'd end up in terms of grade level, but they would be the final exams that I would take in high school before leaving, which again high school played a majority part of this decade for me. What also didn't help was that throughout 2017, throughout the start of 2017, I was going through some personal problems, which I'm not really going to get into because I feel like I just end up embarrassing myself if I told you about it. Close friends and family members only really know about that kind of stuff, but the less I say about it, the better. But I think the biggest fear that was going through my head as I went through high school was whether or not I'd get into college, whether or not I'd get the grades itself that I'd need to get into college, which obviously I would, but often when I'm facing struggling situations, I put myself in the mindset where I expect the worst. It's something that I've naturally done for a majority of my life. I'm going to try and break out of it, but I have done this feature a lot. I put myself in a mindset where I expect the worst thing to happen and just sort of get on with it. I didn't think that I would get the grades that I would need in order to get into college. To which family members and friends would always chip in to remind me that I've already made so much progression from when I was in I've already made so much progression from when I was in primary school. I've matured. I have matured a lot. I had been able to do well in class. I was able to talk with people better, a hell of a lot better than I did in primary school. And I'm glad that they gave me that constant reminder. And if you're listening in, any of the people that gave me that sort of a chipping on the shoulder when I wasn't really feeling too sure about myself. Thanks. I really do appreciate it. It's funny how the phrase "I remember it like it was just yesterday" can play a major factor to my memory. I can still remember what felt like my last proper day of high school, and that was, I think it was the Leavers prom. And I remember a moment that's always stuck out to me. It was I think it was the one time that I danced at the Leavers prom. Yeah, I only really like dance once because even for me being in year 11, I was still incredibly shy around people. But a good friend of mine got me to dance to the song "Mr. Brightside" by The Killers. I think it was. Hold on, let me check. Yeah, The Killers. That was it. And I remember I was doing a really shit dance. It was the kind of like this. It was the most basic, ridiculous looking dance that a guy like me could ever do. Along to Mr. Brightside. But I remember in that moment, I'm not sure if it was in the moment or after the moment, but it was definitely around that moment. While I was dancing, I thought to myself, I'm being me. I'm being me around other people, and they're not laughing at me. I mean, obviously they were laughing at me for the ridiculous like dance that I was doing, but I was understanding where they were coming from. But they weren't laughing at me in an insulting way. They weren't looking at me in a way that says, "Fucking hell, look at that idiot." They were looking at me in a way as like, "Man, there's a good guy, enjoying himself." I'll always thank my friend who got me to dance that day, by the way, because I don't think I ever would have felt like that. I wouldn't have got that feeling of satisfaction in the back of my mind if I hadn't gotten up and danced that night. And I never would have felt like I never would have felt like I would have changed as much as I felt. Hold on. I never would have felt the change as much as I did in that moment if I didn't do it. And that was good. That was a good thing to leave behind for what played a majority for me in this decade. It gave me a feeling of satisfaction and a little bit of confidence as I went off to as I went off to college, which I was still scared shitless about. But that gave me a sort of kick up the arse that I needed. And you know what? College was a hell of a lot better. Obviously, I'm still in my final year, so there's yet to be a final verdict on it. But my first 2 years of college, I can definitely say from what followed after high school, it was just better. That's what I could think about for this decade. It kept getting. That's what I could think about with this decade. It got better and better, and crazier and crazier. A lot of ups, a lot of downs, but yeah. I know I keep on like stammering over myself, but that really is all that I can say about this decade for me personally. I could talk about, you know, what changed like politically over the decade or culturally in terms of like, films and music and all that stuff, but I'm talking about me specifically. So let's do a quick then and now. Let's look at 2000, where I was in 2010 versus where I am in 2019. So in 2010, I was 9 years old, about to turn 10. I was unsure of myself, extremely shy, not confident in the way that I spoke, and not thinking that I was ever able to go anywhere, as from what I believed, only my family believed in me. I was a massive fan of Thomas the Tank Engine. I was just getting into Pokemon, and I like to spend time to myself. I could be in my own world when nobody from school could laugh at me, and I could just sort of be happy to myself. Now I'm in 2019. I'm 19, about to turn 20 as of next year. I am in my final year of college, doing media studies. I'm a hell of a lot more relaxed when it comes to talking to other people. I like to record videos, edit them together. I like to write when I get ideas. I like to spend time with my friends when the opportunity arises. I also like to spend time with my family as well. And I see myself as a future radio presenter or film writer that likes to entertain people as well as, make them feel better about themselves if they're going through tough times. And I like that I think like that. I'd like to hope that there's a good future out there for me, and I'd like to think that the next decade will be a time period where I come into my own and I manage to make my mark on the media industry as well as other people in the world. I don't want to sound vain by saying I want to be recognised, but I want to say that I want to do good for other people. And even if it's not, entirely noticed, just any notice will do. Just as a saying, hey, this guy did this for me. Good on him. Here's to the 2010s decade, everybody. Happy New Year.